The federal government is making big changes to Canada's immigration system. The target for permanent residents is dropping from 500,000 to 395,000 next year, with further reductions in 2026 and 27. Well, the number of temporary residents will also be cut over the next 3 years from just over 7% of the population to 5%. Well, the move comes after criticism that the population increase is impacting housing and affordability. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau admitted that after the pandemic, the government didn't get the balance quite right. And joining us live with more on these details is Immigration Minister Marc Miller. We appreciate your time, Minister. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you, Jamie.
And you even said when you took over the file in July of last year that things did get out of control. And I'm curious, is yesterday's reduction kind of an admission that your predecessor and the Prime Minister's policies were not executed properly, that has now led to a number of issues, including a housing crisis, affordability crisis, strains on our healthcare system, food banks, not to mention some cracks in our security screening processes? Was this an admission of dropping the ball on this file?
You know, Jamie, the Prime Minister put me in that position to make a few things change. I think we realized as a government that we need to take a look at what the immigration system was doing in terms of the flow and the volume into Canada, and to give a better portrait to Canadians about what the general population looked at, particularly with the influx of temporary residents. We knew, and my predecessor knew, that things had to change. It's arrogant for ministers to sort of look behind, say what could have, would have, should have happened. We grew the immigration levels in Canada for a really valid reason after COVID. You can remember businesses, small and big, were asking for more labor. Universities, institutions were asking for more people to come in. So we did this for a reason, and it kept us out of a recession. I wouldn't spit on that, but those things have come with a conundrum and an impact on affordability. I don't think we should exaggerate and put all in the backs of immigrants. But Canadians have been telling us for some time, economists have been telling us, provinces have been telling us that we need to adjust. And I think the plan that we did yesterday, which is a significant reduction, I won't underplay it, but it is something that is reasonable and a plan that provides for controlled, managed growth over the next 3 years. And I think that's what Canadians expect us to do and expect the responsible government to do.
And in immigration, so important to our economy. But, you know, given this is about a 20% reduction, we do have an aging workforce that is retiring. You guys have put a cap on student visas. So a lot of those businesses are going to be looking for those workers. But with these reductions, is the workforce even going to be there moving forward?
You know, Jamie, I think we're in a pretty lucky position as a country. We have a lot of domestic labor here where businesses can certainly readjust. And you mentioned a really important point. When I was born, there were 7 workers to 1 retiree. We got a lot of social services that are part of our national identity. We're closer to 3 workers per retiree, and that's a problem. We've made an important shift in making the labor force younger. Immigration has been a huge solution to that, but it can't be the only one. And so getting the mix right, making sure that we're working with provinces, Canadians are asking us to have a better coordinated immigration system, is important to continuing to build that immigration consensus.
This is historically has not been a controversial file. It's been a fairly nonpartisan, that people from both sides of the aisle welcome immigrants to our country. But when we see what happens when a file like this could be potentially mismanaged, we're now seeing the effects of that. We've got record use of food banks here in Canada. Over 1 million people in Ontario are relying on food banks in the past year. We have over 50% of the refugees that land here in Toronto are occupying our shelter systems, which is not a long-term solution. And for many Canadians who have lived their entire lives here, many of them are finding themselves living in tent encampments because life has become so unaffordable under your government. Can you appreciate the concerns of Canadians and how they're feeling and how they're looking at the mismanagement, or what many critics might categorize as mismanagement, and now we're in problems that our country has not really dealt with ever?
Yeah, and I wouldn't say that immigration hasn't been uncontroversial. We spent our first election talking about Syrian refugees, the evacuation of Kabul in the last election, the welcoming of Ukrainians. So immigration has always been a hot topic. It is indeed, I think, supercharged, particularly in the last year. And we are facing challenges of affordability. Obviously, I wouldn't put that all on the backs of immigration, but the flow has contributed to affordability challenges. I think the plan that we put forward is fundamentally a reasonable one, and I think it shows to those people that decide whether we have rate cuts. We just saw a significant rate cut, which will impact affordability for everyone in this country, some significant changes. And they're looking keenly at this immigration plan that they need to see as reasonable. And I think we have to propose that to Canadians. The federal government has its share of responsibilities, but so do provinces and territories, and those businesses that do rely on immigrants. That has gotten overheated, and I think the criticism that I put on us is that we trusted provinces and territories a little too long when it comes to the management of temporary immigration for universities, colleges, the temporary foreign work program. And I think that's some work that we need to correct together with provinces.
Moving forward, I think a lot of the people are looking to see how this is going to impact housing affordability. Your predecessor is now in charge of housing, has set some pretty ambitious goals of, 3.78 million homes by 2031. That works out to about over 500,000 homes per year, about over 50,000 homes per month every day, pretty much from now until the next 7 years. How do you anticipate this is going to level things out for millions of Canadians who are completely priced out of the housing market? How do you think that these immigration levels are going to impact that?
I'd say two things off the bat. If we get this right, and we have to get it right, that means 670,000 fewer units to be built by 2027. That is significant. And also in the measures that I took with respect to international students, we've seen real impacts of that with price reductions in rent in Surrey and Vancouver and Toronto, about 8 to 10%. So things are moving, things are getting more affordable, and with the rate cut, we have some hope. We do have to continue to be building units. The federal government has to be involved, but so do the provinces. We all have responsibility in getting this right. But I think this plan does provide a reasonable middle ground where we can actually show growth and keep building that consensus that we built so carefully in Canada.
I want to talk about something now that you've been the immigration minister for over a year, and in fairness to you, a lot of these things, some of the issues we're dealing with now happened prior to you becoming the minister. One of the issues I wanted to talk about is the fact that over the last couple of months, we had two stories of major terrorist attacks from ISIS that were thwarted because of some of the cracks in our immigration system. We had two of these individuals who were here on permanent resident status. One of them was caught on camera dismembering another human being. Somehow he still got his PR card. The other thing was the fact that you had an individual going down into the United States. What concrete steps have you done to prevent any of these, nefarious individuals from coming into our country? What concrete steps are you taking to strengthen that screening process so that individuals aren't coming here and planning attacks, like, for instance, on the Jewish community?
Well, first, as a responsibility to Canadians to keeping them safe, I won't speak about alleged facts in a case that, in order to get people properly prosecuted, people like us have to be a little more reserved in our public commentary on this. I do share the shock and horror with respect to these things. I also have the responsibility of acting. I think, as a general proposition, we are safer as a country than we were 10 years ago, particularly with the introduction of biometrics. In North America, we do
Is it safer if we're letting in people who are ISIS members who are planning attacks?
Again, not going to speculate on specific incidents. The reality is, if you look at some of the facts in the case, one of the individuals did come in through the U.S. This is a North America perimeter challenge that we face along with our American partners and our security partners. If you think that we can't, we would indeed have to close the borders entirely to keep Canada hermetically sealed and safe. That's not me necessarily saying that. I believe that proposition. It's former Immigration Minister Jason Kenney that said that. We have a layered security perimeter in Canada, outside, inside, and at the border, and we have to get that right. And we have to continually innovate and make sure that we are keeping Canadians safer.
Minister, I'm being told to wrap it up, but I have to ask you before you leave. Earlier this week on Parliament Hill, you and your colleagues met in the Liberal caucus to discuss some of the concerns from your colleagues and essentially asked the Prime Minister to step down. You called that garbage in a press conference, and I'm wondering what message does that send to your Liberal colleagues who have severe concerns about how the direction that the country is going in, and also have severe concerns about their constituents who are talking about how unaffordable life is under your government. And at the same time, many of those MPs are concerned about their jobs as we have an election a year from now.
Look, fair enough, and I've been harsh on some of the colleagues. I didn't like the backroom politics. I think you need to say things to people's face, and that's all I asked for. And I think that was done in our caucus meeting. I respect the heck out of people like Wayne Long. In fact, him and I have traded punches in the boxing ring together. He knows what to get when you take a shot at someone and you get it back. And that's fair and square. It's fair game. But we need to be focusing on Canadians, and I do think that is silly to be focusing on anything other than Pierre Poilievre, who is probably one of the most destructive forces Canada's seen in a while.
Immigration Minister Marc Miller, we appreciate your time. Thanks for coming to the studio.